For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
Okay, so Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. Ralph's thoughts on the original Black Flag are pretty well documented since he's never been shy about calling it one of his favorite games ever, and given he's already done a 40-minute preview on it that covered a lot of ground, he thought it'd be fun to hand this review over to me, and I was more than happy to oblige. Despite 2026 being the year of many hotly anticipated games, this was actually the one I was looking forward to the most, because Assassin's Creed Black Flag is in fact the only mainline Assassin's Creed entry I have not played. I know. Suffice to say, it's been one of my deepest gaming shames as someone who considers themselves a fan of this franchise. I think at the time of its release, I wasn't totally drawn to the whole pirate thing, particularly the focus on ship battles, since those were my least favorite parts of Assassin's Creed 3 and every Assassin's Creed game since. But after years of hearing people praise this thing, myself feeling fatigued by the modern entries, and finishing that Black Sails series, which by the way is an awesome show that in hindsight acts as a great companion piece to this game, I promised myself that someday I'd loop back to Black Flag, and hey, as luck would have it, Ubisoft were working on a remake. Having now played and rolled credits after some 30 hours, I can say that, yeah, this game deserves all of the hype that it's gotten over the years, and I think Ubisoft have done a brilliant job updating it for the modern day. Like, I'm going into this in the year 2026 with no nostalgia goggles. I'm here to tell you that Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced is now my favorite Assassin's Creed game. Now here's the thing, right? I imagine that had this remake not existed, and I instead played the original game this year, I'm sure I would have ranked it very highly as is, because everything in this remake that hasn't changed from the original still absolutely holds up. I think Black Flag has easily the most affecting story and memorable cast of characters in the franchise. Its activity variety and more restrained progression feel quite refreshing when set against the bloat of the modern games. The ship combat is so much more engaging than I imagined it'd be, and of course there's the music. Man, the music in this game is absolutely incredible. With this remake, all of that remains true, but now there's been even more feathers added to what was already a feather-filled cap. Now, not only do I think this is the best written Assassin's Creed game, but it's also the best looking by virtue of this massive visual overhaul that makes for a truly stunning and immersive rendition of the Caribbean while enhancing story beats. The combat strikes a fine balance between the older games and the new, making you feel like a badass pirate assassin, but in a way that's encouraged and earned, and that combined with refinements to stealth and parkour arguably makes this one of the best Assassin's Creed games from a gameplay perspective. But Ubisoft didn't stop there. They could have, but they didn't. Because sitting above all those overhauls are all the brand new additions. Some of them, like most of the new quests and the ability to swim underwater anywhere in the world, aren't as meaningful as I'd hoped, but others, like the new weather effects and new cutscenes written by the original game's writer, do uplift the whole package. All told, Black Flag Resynced takes the incredibly solid foundations laid down by the Ubisoft of 13 years ago, builds upon it with the artistic and technical expertise of today's Ubisoft, and implements all the lessons learned from the modern games. I can't speak for them, of course, but I really think that fans of Black Flag are going to be quite pleased with how faithfully this has been updated, and to those like me who are fortunate enough to be playing this beloved game for the first time in this way, I hope your sea legs are ready for one hell of an adventure.
Sight for salty eyes. He's wrong about me!
I hope it's so.
I'm a husband and a father, I have responsibilities. Life can't be all pleasure and distraction, Duncan.
Alright, so I think the most obvious thing we should talk about first with Black Flag Resynced is the visuals. Now don't get me wrong, I think the original Black Flag was a great looking game at the time of its release, but I'll remind you that that was basically 2 generations ago, releasing on the PS3 and 360 back in 2013. So Ubisoft have rebuilt Black Flag from the ground up in the latest iteration of the Anvil engine, the same one used for Assassin's Creed Shadows. And look, say what you will about Shadows, but there's no denying that that was a fantastic looking video game. Almost goes without saying then that the same is true of this this remake. The Caribbean cerulean seas and turquoise shallows shine so vividly here, its tropical jungles are ridiculously dense with vegetation, and its rickety villages and main ports are crammed with detail and bustling with life. Add to that fancy new-gen lighting and the new and improved weather effects that often completely change the mood, and Black Flag Resynced delivers the most striking and immersive rendition of the high seas we've ever seen in a video game. That sense of virtual tourism has long been one of this franchise's defining qualities, and getting to experience that at its peak in the golden age of piracy is pretty damn magical, I'm not gonna lie.
We'll heave him up and away we'll go, waving to the air.
Considering this level of fidelity, I thought it ran pretty well too. Playing this on my main PC equipped with an RTX 4090 at 1440p max settings with ray tracing also set to max and no frame gen enabled, I was hitting around 60 FPS with the occasional dip. Turning on DLSS to balanced was a lot more comfortable though and had me sitting at around 80. And yeah, that is admittedly an expensive rig, I don't have another PC to test it on, but I did play around 10 hours of this on my laptop, which is getting pretty old now. It struggles to play most modern games these days. I know people turn their nose at AI upscaling, fair enough, but hey, I was pretty happy with the fact that with DLSS set to balanced and FSR frame gen set to 2x, I was able to play this at 1440p, high settings, ray tracing also set to max with a consistent 60 plus FPS. I didn't notice any artifacting or input delay, so do with that information what you will. You might be wondering why I was insistent on having ray tracing set to max, and the answer might be obvious to you watching the gameplay, given how much water there is in this game, between the puddles left by the frequent rain and, you know, the ocean. I do recommend playing with ray tracing on if you can, because those crisp, accurate reflections do make a huge difference.
She's got the thing back, I'm afraid. The little one's been poorly this week, so she's worrying her head off waiting for any change.
Overall, I was pretty blown away by what Ubisoft have achieved here with this visual overhaul. I mean, Black Flag is not a small game. They've had to remodel, retexture, and replace every crate, bottle, tree, and beyond, all while maintaining as much of the original look as they could. It really can't be understated just how much work the art team has done here, and it absolutely pays off. I'd go as far to say that this is one of the best looking video games you can play right now. This makeover extends to the characters too, of course, and while I'm sure some may have mixed feelings on their new looks, as is often the case with remakes, I personally think that Ubisoft have done a pretty bang-up job updating them, while remaining faithful to their original designs. Obviously, this added fidelity makes these characters feel more real, but in many ways, it also enhances their story beats. A good example, I think, is this incredible monologue from Thatch, aka Blackbeard.
Give your quarry something to fear. Some hellish thing from a fevered dream. And men will drop to their knees, pleading for their lord before all else.
Oh god.
Pretty fantastic cutscene, right? If we compare this with the original, fine details like wrinkles in his updated model show his age a lot better, and the sizzling fuses light his face in a way that's even more menacing. You can see the sweat on Bonnet's skin and the tears beginning to well in his eyes as Thatch towers over him. Point is, the new visuals add extra layers to the killer performances of the original cast, making already arresting scenes like this even more so. I think you can also pick out what's been slightly lost though. The new facial animation does appear a little more restrained, lacking the same fierceness in the scowl and furrowed brow, and while the more dramatic lighting is effective, perhaps the flat overcast of the original emphasized how intimidating Thatch can be, even in unremarkable conditions. As I didn't have these comparisons to draw from, these changes didn't bother me personally, and to be honest, I think the underlying performances still come through so strongly that most people, even fans of the original, would only notice them when set side by side like this. But look, as much of a sucker as I am for some good looking visuals, the main reason this game left such an impression on me, as the original did for so many others, is the razor sharp writing. I know this isn't strictly the remake's doing, but I'd be remiss not to at least briefly talk about it. Back when Ubisoft were making 20+ hour stories instead of 50+, hacked with properly shot cutscenes and expensive performance capture, they knew they needed to make every line count, and damn did the original game's lead writer, Darby McDevitt, make them count. The tale of Edward Kenway is so captivating and treated with such verisimilitude. I love that his quest for a free life is cleverly aligned with that of the Creed, but I also love that this story interrogates that freedom versus control mantra that defines the Assassin versus Templar conflict, having Kenway witness the price that is often paid in that pursuit and regularly testing his character. Like any man, his motivations wax and wane, deep down always meaning well, but could just as easily succumb to the allure of wealth for his own sake if it weren't for those around him steering him back to true north.
For Christ's sake, Edward. Don't anything but the stink of riches wrinkle your nose.
What's got into you, man?
Reality, mate. Reality.
He is a brilliant character with a brilliant story, and the allies and villains he meets along the way are just as multifaceted. They each have such distinct agendas and personalities and ways of speaking that make them sound like they're actually from this time period, a far cry from what we get in the newer AC entries. Thatch, Bonnet, Bonnie, Rackham, Vane, Rogers, Roberts, and more, every one of these characters has seeded themselves in my memory, even those who only appeared a handful of times. It's been a minute since I played the older games in the series, and I'm known to have piss poor memory, but I can't recall any other Assassin's Creed game with anywhere near as memorable a cast. And in fact, I'd go as far to say it's something that scarce few games, even today, are able to achieve.
Dash my buttons. Your life seems a grand one, if I may say. So full of adventure. How marvelous.
There has been at least one notable change in the narrative department though, and that's the removal of the modern day stuff. My understanding is that the original game had you playing as a sort of game developer using the Animus for research or something, all of course part of a nefarious plan for the modern day Templars to extract the whereabouts of an ancient device. In the remake, this story thread is straight up gone. Again, this is something I expect some purists will take issue with, and I get it. That meta-narrative added another layer of intrigue and served as the connective tissue between the games. Personally though, I never cared much for this. I didn't really like being pulled out of the immersion, and having the more interesting story and interesting characters that I'm invested in feel like a bullet point in someone else's story. So I don't mind that it's not here, and its absence also isn't felt as keenly, since in their place are new scenes written by McDevitt himself, which, while few, strengthen Black Flag's emotional core, that being Kenway's relationship with the wife he left behind, Caroline.
So, how does it feel to drink like a duke?
Edward, my father is a merchant. I've had chocolate many times.
Have you?
Have you not?
No.
Go on then.
Like many scenes written by McDevitt, this intro manages to say so much with so little. It puts Kenway's inner conflict front and center, emphasizing that the life he's yearning to give Caroline is one she's in fact already lived and willingly leaves behind for him. It makes clear that his pursuit to obtain great wealth in support of his loved ones, while noble, is in most part driven by his own pride and insecurities, or at least that's my read on it. There are a couple more scenes like this scattered throughout the story, acting as regular reminders of what Kenway is fighting for, with McDevitt pointing out in an interview with IGN that, quote, the sum total feeling should be that you feel her presence throughout his entire journey, end quote. And I'd say that's definitely the case. The story additions that I'm a little more iffy about were the new quests, apparently not written by McDevitt, since he said in that same interview that the only ones he wrote were to do with Caroline. There are two new quests involving Thatch and Bonnet. Those I didn't have a problem with. In fact, I quite liked them. They're short and sweet quests that bring some nice closure to their stories and feel broadly in keeping with the tone of the main game. But then there's the quest lines related to these new officers. These are new characters created just for this remake, and completing their quest lines will see them join your crew, opening up new combat capabilities for your ship. To be clear, I think these quest lines are absolutely worth doing just for these new abilities, as they make the ship combat even more interesting. The stories behind them are not great. They're pretty cut and dry tales of revenge told with very little subtlety and short-lived character arcs, but the worst part is that they sap all personality out of Kenway. I mean, here's an example.
The man who put you in a box. Vile business, Tobias.
So it goes. Should I be spared when others face the box? Should I stand aside and tinker with cannons?
Well, there are no boxes here. And we hoped you would help us with some improvements on the jackdaw.
See what I mean? He's just really dry. He doesn't really care about these people. The only thing he's interested in is what they offer the jackdaw. And he really is like this in every one of these quest lines. Further, the cutscenes here do a lot of that stilted shot reverse shot thing that the modern AC games do, and even have Kenway use that stock hero pose pulled straight out of AC Odyssey. Like, come on, could we really not have come up with a new pose? More disappointing, I think, is that these things bleed into the new A World Without Gold questline. In the previews, this was hinted as some sort of endgame quest quest line, maybe even an epilogue of sorts. It actually opens up just before you hit the last chapter, and what I'll say is, I am thankful that I did it then rather than saving it for after the credits. I won't go into details, of course, but given the significance of that world without gold line, I'd hoped for something a little more profound than what was delivered here. It effectively ignores all the development that Kenway has gone through up to that point in the story, resetting him to factory settings and having him relearn the same lessons only in 2 hours instead of 20, and again without any of the nuance that's present in the main story.
Our quartermaster's not going to like this.
Mum's the word then. She'll come around when she sees the gold.
That said, I do sympathise. It was always going to be a tall task to match the calibre of writing in the original game. Just a shame they couldn't come a little closer to meeting that bar. The good news is that this is by no means the end of what Ubisoft have added here, not even close. Alongside this huge visual overhaul and these story additions, there have also been several big and small additions to the gameplay side. So let's talk about those next. Outside of the visuals, combat is where the game has seen the most renovation. Now, like I said, I didn't play the original, but I do know how it operates, and I did play a ton of Assassin's Creed 3, which, as I understand, plays very similarly, having only released a year prior. The combat in older Assassin's Creed games, like Black Flag, was rather binary. For the most part, you could get through any encounter by just waiting for each enemy to give the signal to either dodge or counter with a stylish insta-kill. And you know what? It worked, and I quite liked it. Simple as it was, the minimized inputs ensured animation all wove together smoothly, making you look cool and feel cool all the time. Like many fans then, I was not all that enthused by the move to the widely adopted action-y combat with blocks, charged heavy attacks, and abilities to cycle off cooldown. It prioritized agency over style which is core to the Assassin's Creed identity, I think, and there was a fear among some that this remake would be leaning in that direction. Thankfully, that's not quite the case. Combat in Black Flag Resynced finds a happy medium between the new and old combat styles that I think works brilliantly. In our interview with creative director Paul Fu, he said it was inspired by YouTube videos people made with Black Flag, stringing together cool combos that leverage all the weapons and counter animations. And yeah, what a great place to pull from. I mean, this is kind of what everyone wants to look like while playing Assassin's Creed, right? But because the game's never really rewarded you for doing so, and that it was awkward having to constantly tap the D-pad to switch weapons, most players did not engage with the combat this way. The design goal then for combat in Resynced was to make that style of play the default. As such, the traditional weapon swaps are gone. The hidden blades cannot be swapped to in combat, they're now only used for stealth kills and the occasional takedown animation. Some will be saddened to hear that, fair enough, but personally I'm not too bummed about it. Then when it comes to your pistols, the left trigger draws your pistols by default, but can be switched to various stealth tools like smoke bombs and the blowpipe when needed. So in regular combat then, you're mostly relying on your trusty swords, with a basic combo and a new special attack unique to each sword type, a thrust for rapiers, a wide slash for cutlasses, and as for the pistol swords, well, good news, they actually fire bullets now. When it comes to the combat loop, you can still get through many encounters by simply waiting for enemies to attack and countering, but that loop's now a little more involved. The parry window is a fair bit tighter than you might expect, and there's now also an extra button input required to perform the takedown animation, which doesn't sound like much, but enemies can and will interrupt you within that short window. So it does retain that parry loop, but you can't be asleep at the wheel anymore. You've constantly got to be aware of what's going on around you, and then that's taken to another level with all the other ways you're able to set up those takedowns. You've got a number of quick actions on the right trigger when combined with a button input, kind of like abilities in the modern AC games, except you don't just fire them out off cooldown, they're instead reserved for specific situations, almost like a fighting game. If an enemy's guarding, you can break that guard by spamming attacks, but it's much quicker to sweep the leg. If an enemy's backing into a wall, you can kick them into it to stagger them, or if they're near a ledge, you can use it to boot them off. If an enemy's a little out of reach or lining up a shot from up high, send them reeling toward you with the rope dart. And if all else fails, you can always fire off a quick pistol shot, provided you've got the ammo. The key thing is that none of these moves are a catch-all, and they'll often be countered in ways that you didn't expect, forcing you to change your approach. Some enemies will just dodge your kicks, or bat away your rope dart. Hell, they can even block your pistol shots, which is not realistic at all, but fair enough. For the most part though, you will still feel pretty unstoppable once you've quickly wrapped your head around these controls and enemy attack patterns, but hey, that's part of the fun of Assassin's Creed, or at least it used to be. They're supposed to be a power fantasy, allowing you to solo an entire battalion and look sick as hell while doing it once you've you've got a flow going. Black Flag Resynced keeps that spirit alive, but by eliminating weapon swapping and offering extra inputs, it feels more intuitive, immediate, and deliberate. How about stealth then? Well, while this hasn't undergone quite as obvious an overhaul, it too benefits from some subtle additions. Getting spotted during a tailing mission no longer restarts the mission, which is nice, you just kick into combat. Kenway can also now manually crouch, where I believe he couldn't before, and a new mechanic for this game is that weather, time of day, and shadows will now affect how easily you're detected. A really great mechanic carried over from Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I personally think had an underrated stealth sandbox. I honestly think the thing that makes stealth feel so good here though is not really to do with stealth at all, it's just the way that Kenway moves. Parkour has long been a staple of this series, yet recent entries have been rightfully criticised for lacking the depth and elegance of the older games. Time will tell how purists might feel about it here, but I don't expect it will suffer the same criticisms, or at least not to the same extent. Kenway in Resynced is very agile, bounding between rooftops, trees, and beams with minimal halts in momentum. The ability to manually jump, back eject, and side eject for a higher skill ceiling and self-expression are also in here at launch, whereas the other modern entries had to wait over half a year to get these. Overall, I think fans will be relieved to find that Kenway feels great to control. It's not quite at the level of Unity, which is where I personally feel parkour was at its best, but it's getting pretty damn close. The other major combat element, of course, is the ship combat. Safe to say my assumptions about how I'd feel about this were completely incorrect. The ship combat in this game absolutely rules. There's just so much to hold in your mind during these naval battles. There's the undulating waves breaking up the line of sight and forcing you to adapt the arc of your volleys. There's bracing for incoming fire. There's steering the ship to avoid mortars or land masses, or lining yourself up to let a broadside loose. If you played the original, you know all this already, but the remake's new weather effects give you even more to think about. Storms create heavy gusts that you need to fight against, rogue waves that you need to steer into, and water spouts and lightning strikes that you need to get the hell away from. And man, when these new visuals and weather effects are working in harmony with the S-tier soundtrack and the voice acting and the gameplay, it really is something special. Like there was a point in this game where Blackbeard is arousing the crew at the top of his lungs while a terrifying storm is raging on in the background, drenching and battering the jackdaw, all while cannon fire is being blasted back and forth, lighting up the surrounds. And in that moment, I was just thinking to myself, holy shit, did Ubisoft nail this pirate fantasy?
I wanna fuck her life! Kiss that filthy bag! Straight for the bloody ship!
The final new feature worth touching on is that you can now swim in any body of water, whereas before this was reserved for specific diving bell areas. If I'm honest, this didn't add as much to the game as I hoped it would. You'd think it'd encourage exploration with chests hidden in all manner of underwater crevices, but that's not really the case, since chests are clearly marked on arrival to a new area. You'd think it'd expand the stealth sandbox, since swimming underwater avoids detection, but unfortunately there just aren't many occasions in the game where you actually need or can do that. So basically, it's a cool feature, I just wish there were more reasons to use it. However, I get that all of this would have required changes to mission and level design that were probably out of scope for this remake, so I don't fault them too much for it. At the very least, the underwater swimming gives you just that little bit more to see and do in a game that's already chock full of things to see and do. On that note, outside of the new quests and occasional underwater chests, there isn't anything new when it comes to activities, but that's unsurprising. Between hunting, assassination contracts, naval contracts, treasure maps, forts, capturing and sending ships on missions, and more, I think Ubisoft kind of already hit the sweet spot here in offering a huge variety of things to do to drive progression and get more playtime out of the game, but crucially, none of these things insist themselves upon you. Recent Assassin's Creed entries ask you to grind levels and gear just to progress the story, or collect near endless knowledge scrolls to access more abilities. Black Flag, on the other hand, was made in the before times, a time when Ubisoft preferred to keep the progression and difficulty ceiling relatively low, so there's nothing overtly stopping you from doing whatever you want whenever it took your fancy. If I was struggling with some higher difficulty fight, sure, I could plunder some ships to upgrade the jackdaw or harpoon some sharks to craft more pistol holsters, but even the toughest challenges in this game could be overcome by playing smarter, in my experience. I loved this. I hope that in revisiting this more trimmed back design, Ubisoft have perhaps gained a new appreciation for it and that we might see this carried forward into future Assassin's Creed entries.
So, you've got yourself a fancy brig now. Fine.
Toward the end of the credits for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, a note reads, quote, "In 2013, Black Flag was ahead of its time. The Caribbean was a world crafted with love and ambition. Resynced is meant to honor the original and serve as a love letter to our community. A profusion of thanks. Your support and love for Edward made this happen," end quote. And yeah, call me naive, maybe it's PR talk or whatever, but that line about Black Flag Resynced serving as a love letter, I believe it. Even having not played the original, it's clear that what was already stellar, like the writing, performances, cutscene direction, ship combat, activity variety, and progression, have been largely retained here. They knew that stuff was timeless and would still hold up 13 years later, and they were right. They also knew what was a little worse for wear, like the combat and visuals, and I think have managed to successfully raise them up to today's standards without sullying the original vision. And then there's all the extra adornments, and while not all of them are as meaningful as they could be, it's still cool that they're here, because frankly, they didn't need to be. I don't think anyone would have thought less of this remake without all these additions, since so many people loved Black Flag just as it was, and the visual uplift was probably going to be enough to sell copies, but it's nice to see Ubisoft not rest on their laurels. In knowing what to preserve, what to refine, and when to simply get out of their own way, Ubisoft have exercised a level of restraint and thoughtfulness that I think many of us had begun to think the studio had lost. Thankfully, Resynced is proof that they've still got it in them, at least to some degree, and the end result is a remake that's sure to have fans fall in love with this game all over again, while making new ones long into the future. And I know that because it's certainly made one out of me. Like I said in the intro, this is now my favorite Assassin's Creed game ever. It's got the best story, the best visuals, and some of the best gameplay. I had an absolute blast with this, from the first unfurled sail to the last. The legend of Edward Kenway will not be one that I soon forget, that's for damn sure. And for that reason, I strongly recommend Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced.
One question I often get is how to break into the world of content creation. There are a lot of ways to do it, of course: streaming, community building, YouTube, games media, many ways to cut your teeth. Obviously, my stuff eventually ends up on YouTube, but what if YouTube wasn't the right fit for you? What if you wanted to build your own independent gaming outlet or blog, allowing you to talk about games how you like, building a portfolio of work as you did so that you could one day leverage into different opportunities? Well, if you're just starting out, then can I suggest this video sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace lets you build professional-looking websites in minutes. You just select from their extensive list of pre-built templates, customize those templates to your desire, and boom, you're in business. If you can handle formatting a Word document or a PowerPoint slide, then you are already well and truly equipped to make a fantastic looking website through Squarespace. Once it's done and your content starts going up, Squarespace has all sorts of back-end tools to help you grow your site. Detailed analytics tools showcase what your audience is clicking on, and SEO tools and social media integration make it easier for your audience to find you. Recently, Squarespace took things to a whole new level. Their all-new design intelligence framework leverages their 2 decades of experience in website creation to give you even more tools to shape the website of your dreams, helping you with things like copywriting, tone of voice, product descriptions, and more. It's an easy-to-use end-to-end solution that could be the start of your content creation journey if the written word is something that interests you. If it is and you want to get started, then visit squarespace.com to start building your website through their free trial, and if you want to get serious, use offer code SKILLUP to get 10% off your purchase of a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.